I have a nib. I have a nib holder. Calligraphy pen. Hey everyone, this is CJ of CJ's Creative Studio, and today we're going to be doing something that may be a little dumb. I'm going to see how well my calligraphy skills have held up after 2 years of not really using them. I've been doing paintings, and I actually had an easel set up where I usually do my calligraphy, so I didn't do calligraphy. I've actually been through something like this before. I'd taken something like a 17-year break from doing airbrushing, and when I came back to it, this was the first result. Not great. Fortunately, it wasn't long before I started putting out work like this. I just had to shake the rust off. Here are today's weapons of choice. Under a wooden nib holder is a Gillette 303, which is a flexible nib and my usual go-to. Next to that is a broad edge nib, a Mitchell Roundhand No. 2. Under the comic nib holder is a Brause 66 AF, more commonly known as a Brause 66 EF. Under the oblique nib holder is a Hunt 99, which is a very flexible nib. And last but not least is a traditional goose quill pen. I cut it myself a while back, and since it's all inky, I know that at least a couple of years ago it was working fine. So let's get going. With my Gillette 303, we're going to start where many Western alphabets start, with a capital A. That started with such promise, but then I went and did that last little bit. Not to worry, I'm positive there will be more disasters ahead. Let's try an H. Oh dear. Okay, at about this point I'm not feeling comfortable about the whole idea of showing my ineptitude to the public. But then again, that's why we were gifted with YouTube. There. Clearly, as I was finishing that up, I stopped trying very hard. The spacing between my letters isn't consistent. Fortunately, the thickness of my downstrokes isn't too terrible, though the starts need to be more square. It should be better. So a little bit of flourishing to see if I remember any of this. And it hints a little that I used to know what I was doing. Some of the shaking is definitely showing the decades of wear and tear in my hands, and I'm not sure I'm going to get all of that out. But I'll try. Okay, on to the broad nib. Going in, I know this isn't going to look great. The reason being that I'm writing this on a flat writing board. For this style and this nib, I should be writing on a board that's tilted somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees. You see, if the pen is close to level when you're holding it, the nib flow will match what you are writing. And that's being borne out here, as the ink is wanting to just pour off this nib. It's also not helping that it's been even longer than 2 years since I've done broad edge writing. So I'm having to try to remember how to draw the letters. In case you're wondering why the word minimum, it used to be a test to see how close you could get to being unreadable while still being readable. Readability was always a challenge with this style of lettering. And lastly, a little improvised CJ, which surprisingly is almost readable except for a little control issue. Well done, relatively speaking. It's not a high bar there. All right, now for the Brause 66EF. I made a mistake here. The Brause EF is a pretty small nib. This word is being written way too large for the nib, and I'm not even spreading the tines far enough to compensate. On the second attempt, it's looking a little bit better. I have much more control of what I'm doing, and I'm actually able to write with the sort of rhythm you want to be able to write with using a pointed pen. The act of writing should be like dancing. And now to see how completely terrible I am using an oblique nib holder. You may be wondering why in the world anyone would want to write with a nib holder like this. Good question. It's so that a right-hander can write in the slanted cursive styles without having to tilt the paper excessively. You mostly see this nowadays by people who are very well trained in the cursive form known as Spencerian, which came out in the mid to late 19th century. If you research calligraphy or cursive writing, it pops up a lot. A lot of thin lines and flourishes accented with some very thick strokes. To be honest, I don't like that style of cursive, so I've never really practiced it. Consequently, I've never really had a lot of use for oblique nib holders. Not to say I haven't used them, nor used them enough to be able to give this recommendation. Spend the money to get a good one. It makes the experience so much better. So clearly, I'm not a master penman, certainly not when it comes to writing with oblique nib holders. And lastly, we come to the goose quill pen. I'll go a little traditional and start with a little Declaration of Independence action. I was surprised the first time I cut and used a quill. Once you get used to holding them, they write surprisingly well. They have a good feel that is very comfortable and usually fairly smooth. The only real annoyance is that sometimes they squeak when you're writing. This last bit shows that these pens really do accomplish their intended function, handwriting. Here I'm not drawing the letters, I'm actually writing cursive. And it's a breeze. No wonder that in this pen's heyday, which was about between 1540 and 1800, they were used far and wide. And here's a little something that people ask me to do from time to time. Can you write John Hancock's signature? Well, I used to. When I was practicing to do my art piece Lapsed Vigilance, I learned how to do it. Let's see if I retained any of that. So I hope you found that useful or at least enjoyable. If you did, please click the like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. And stay tuned for more videos on art, writing, handwriting, and other fun stuff. And as always, be creative and keep on practicing.